everyone, and welcome to Careers of the Future, a show where students get to hear from Ismailis at the leading edge of their fields on what the future of work looks like and how they can most effectively prepare to figure out what that looks like in their specific field. My name is Yasmin Rajwani, and I'm also a member of the Ismailis youth team, and today I'll be your host for this episode. In today's episode, we'll be discussing cybersecurity and tech policy and what the future of work looks like. And we're honored to have a very special guest today, Irfan Hemani. Irfan is currently the Deputy Director for Cybersecurity at the UK's Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. He's also the co-author of the Harvard-Belfer National Cyber Power Index, or the NCPI, which is the first index that comprehensively measures cyber power. Previously, Irfan was the program director at the Aga Khan Foundation in Egypt, and he's also worked in Deloitte's Technology Risk Advisory team. Irfan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yasmin, good to be here with you.
Awesome. So I'm so excited to dive deeper into what you do and what you think about cybersecurity and tech policy. So to get us started, I was wondering if you could just give us a little bit of a sense of what these big concepts of cybersecurity and tech policy really mean. So if you could kind of break down for us what those mean and maybe why they're important.
Sure, I can do. So thank you firstly, thank you for having me on your show. I think it's a great thing what you're all doing. So on the question of what is cybersecurity and technology policy, it's really a growing field. It's something that has it's emerged over the last 20 or so years, and it's really become quite important these days. I think given that everything that we do has an element of online connectivity or is connected to some kind of digital technology, cybersecurity is really looking at how you keep those interactions safe and secure and give people confidence to really utilize them to their full advantage. And that falls into a broader category of technology policy, which is really looking at some of the big questions that we need to solve around how we use this technology. I think technology policy has gone from being something that was probably once quite a technical area to something that really is answering or trying to answer some of the questions that we've been asking for hundreds of years about how we do things and how we should do things and who gets to do what. So it's quite an interesting field. It's become really important now, given that technology is really just a part of everything we do, and it's an exciting field to be in.
Yeah, wow, you captured that really well. Thank you so much for that intro. And I think you're really right. You know, technology policy and digital security is really a part of everything we do, from kind of personal to professional in today's world. So now that, you know, we have a better grasp of these topics and what they mean, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about what you do at the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, and what your role is and what type of specific projects you work on?
Sure, yeah, I'll be very happy to. So I'm a Deputy Director of the Cybersecurity and Digital Identity Department, Directorate, and really what we do is we look at how do we improve cybersecurity and cyber resilience in organizations across the whole economy. So we look at what levers of government policy we have or what we might need to create to incentivize or mandate better cybersecurity and resilience. And the reason that's really important is because our entire lives have some kind of digital dependency these days, and so it's really and that's not necessarily interactions that are held by government. These are interactions or connections that are held by companies or organizations or other people that really maintain this network of connected technologies. And so we really look at what can be done to improve the reliability through improved resilience and security of those organizations.
Wow, that's really fascinating. And it seems like, you deal with kind of a breadth of different issues, within the government, but also it's like applicable to other realms of society. So that's really, really fascinating. Thanks for sharing. What I'm kind of interested in learning about, and I think some of our viewers might be as well, is how did you get here? Take us back through your journey a little bit, and did you always know you wanted to end up in tech policy? And if not, what was that path like? And how did you get to the role that you're in today?
Yeah, sure. So I actually started in technology advisory at Deloitte after I left school. And I worked there for a year on a placement scheme before going to university. And then when I was at university, I did something that was completely different and nothing to do with technology or consultancy or advisory. I studied Arabic and economics. And then afterwards, I went back to Deloitte and took on a similar role, again on technology advisory technology advisory consultancy. And then I spent about 5 years at Deloitte, managing projects and programs that looked at improving technology managing the technology risk of quite recognizable clients. So Apple, Vodafone, BBC, ITV, so some quite big names, and working with them to really improve how they managed the risk in their technology environments, which for those kinds of organizations is a large part of their business environment. And that really gave me a good understanding of how organizations work, but also how to manage people and projects and budgets, and really kind of see how organizations develop as well. And then I went on from there to something slightly different. Went on to work for the Aga Khan Foundation in Egypt, which was really looking to use some of that business development knowledge that I had, or business development experience that I had picked up. So they were expanding quite rapidly, and were looking to kind of set up systems and processes within the organization to deal with that increased growth. It went from being quite a small organization to a bit of a larger one while I was there. So it was a slightly different subject matter, but dealing with the same concepts of how do you measure progress, how do you measure success, how do you build teams, how do you build the systems that can deal with a much larger organization, how do you work better with your stakeholders, how do you communicate to them, and that kind of thing. And then I took a bit of a career break. And I went to the US to study for a year, and decided that actually I wanted to go back into the technology sector, but in the government policy sphere rather than the private sector. Just partly to do something different, but also partly recognizing that these are the questions that government are dealing with around technology are going to define our lives for the next 50 years or more. And it was quite an exciting time to be in that field. I think what we're seeing in those technology policy conversations, whether you're in the US, whether you're in the EU, or the UK, or India, or China, or the Far East, these are questions that are being answered now that are going to define our lives for the next few decades. So I was really keen to get back into, or to get into that field. And then I moved back home to the UK to spend, most importantly, to spend time with my family again, something I hadn't done for about 5 years at the time, and also took on a role with the UK government to work on exactly that, a significant part of technology policy, which was cybersecurity policy.
Yeah, no, I think that's incredibly inspiring, and you share a really useful point about how you were able to build your toolkit and throughout those years and throughout those different roles. And as you mentioned, I think cybersecurity and tech policy is becoming applicable in various sectors and in various parts of our personal, professional lives. And so, I think people would be interested to know where is cybersecurity, where is tech policy going in the next 5, 10, 50 years, and what kind of opportunities, if I'm a student thinking about getting into this field, do you think will exist? Will they be across sectors? What will the field look like, do you think?
So it's changing rapidly. I think I mentioned this very briefly earlier, but I think we're going from a place where technology is part of the broader business environment or organization environment, to tech is how you do things and how you do everything. So I think if it's not already, it will soon be ubiquitous in how we do things. I think you won't be able to get away from it in organizations. There will obviously be some exceptions, but very few. And I think the questions that we're trying to answer are going to be ones that aren't related to technology as such. They're going to be related to how technology allows us or doesn't allow us to do particular things, and how it contributes to our lives, and how it might detract from quality of life. So I think it's a growing field. I think it has a reputation for being quite technical, and I think anyone that works in technology policy will say that it doesn't have to be. I think in these sectors of if we take cybersecurity for an example, you can enter the sector through the traditional ways, through going through computer science degrees, or learning how to work on particular programs or applications, or indeed through the security route, so understanding how to analyze, manage, mitigate threats in the digital environment. But there's also much broader business functions in cybersecurity. It's a growing sector, so the businesses in that sector are looking to grow, and they need the traditional people that can communicate, people that can build relationships, people that can analyze information and understand how to target the next client. So the sector is growing like any other sector, and in that way it needs people in the same way that any other sector does. But there are still the technical roles, and those are only going to get bigger and more important as well. And then there's the real analytical roles as well. So being able to look at threat information, or being able to look at trends over time, or being able to look at how companies manage their organization and their technology in a way that keeps them safe. So there's all kinds of roles. It's a very new area. So I think there are a number of institutions and organizations that are doing cybersecurity degrees or cybersecurity certifications, but it's still not clear to students what they should be taking to get into the sector. That's something that's still kind of evolving. I know my team in government are doing quite a bit to try to map out what those careers are like, and how you get into cybersecurity. But you can be a risk manager, or you can have risk management expertise. You can be a number of different professions, or have a number of different attributes to get into the sector. And the other side of this is, it's not just about being in the sector. I think this is something that is coming to every business and organization. So if you are a lawyer, being able to deal with cybersecurity regulations, or being able to prosecute cyber criminals is going to be a growing sector. If you are a consultant, being able to provide advice, even if you're not a cybersecurity consultant, but being able to provide advice that understands what the realm of cybersecurity is going to be important. So, the sector itself is growing, the technology and the expertise needed to fuel that sector are growing, and other sectors are going to be that people use all the time, the services that people use all the time are going to need to understand this better, and there's going to be opportunities for people to really thrive in that.
I think you've highlighted really well kind of the growing and interdisciplinary nature of the field, but also clearly, how it's going to be applicable to pretty much any role, in the near future. And how being able to understand cybersecurity and tech policy and the analytical and maybe technical skills that come along with it is going to become more and more valuable. So that's really, really insightful. One, question I have, you mentioned the technical aspect of things. You mentioned the business management, the interpersonal communication and relationships, and how these are all encapsulated to make up the field and to make up someone who can work in the sector. But what should students, be focusing on? What would you feel are the most valuable skills to kind of try and start developing in their toolkit from now if they can see a future in cybersecurity and tech policy?
So it's a really good question, and I think anyone that gives kind of career advice will say the same things. I think there are certain there's certain bits of knowledge which you will need to learn for jobs that you absolutely have to have, and often the bit that causes the barrier between qualification and employment is the soft skills, the skills that everyone needs to be effective in a workplace. And sometimes, depending on where you are, those vary, but being able to understand complex concepts and simplify them, being able to communicate those, being able to work in teams, being able to lead people, being able to manage budgets, being able to manage projects. All of these kind of, not necessarily hard skills, are really important in the workplace, and I think that's going to be a key differentiator. In terms of the, skills and qualifications, I think that part of the discipline is still developing and still evolving. But there are certainly cybersecurity qualifications that you can do. I think an understanding or a competency around being able to code, being able to write certain in certain languages, being able to know your way around network architecture, and there's professional qualifications to be network administrators or systems administrators, IT service administrators. There's a whole range of professions or professional qualifications that one can get to get towards this field.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. I think you're right. Soft skills are becoming much more important and something that employers are looking at, and also just for the longevity and sustainability of projects in terms of what work you actually do. So, if I'm a student, I think there's a lot of great things that, we've discussed. We've discussed soft skills. We've discussed some of the more technical qualifications. But what are some first actionable steps that, next steps that I could take as a student? Would it be taking a coding course? Would it be, developing some of my teamwork and leadership skills? Would it be connecting to someone in the field? What would you advise, a student in high school or in university as their first next steps?
So I'd say read up on the sector that you're looking to go into and what interests you. I mean, one of the things that we're really lucky with now is you can, there's so much information out there about all kinds of different professions, and what you might find is that you are more interested in a particular sector than a particular profession. So you might enjoy, the technology sector as a whole, rather than being a technologist, as it were. So, and if your skill set or you were more interested in, policy work, or you were more interested in the business side of things or the legal side of things, then you can steer yourself into a particular sector without becoming, the technical expert in that sector. So I'd say, firstly, make sure you research on as much as you can and speak to people about what they do and what you might like to do. I think developing your internal or your own personal set of skills and knowing what you are good at is really important. There are some people that will thrive in working with other people. There are some people that will hate working with other people. And knowing those distinctions about yourself is really important, so that you can pick out the kind of career that you want. So, if you prefer to, if you're more interested in the financial side of things, then you can go towards project management or financial management or financing of certain things within the sector. So I think the other thing is knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at, and really playing to your strengths.
Yeah, amazing. So we've got some great next steps there, right? So we talked about doing your research, figuring out what sector or what part of the sector you might fit into, connecting with others who you know and who you can connect with online, and then also figuring out what works for you, right? And what your personal skills are like, what your team environment looks like, and what environment you would thrive in. So those are some really great next steps for students to try and take on. Thank you so much. So I think it's important to consider the situation that we're in right now and what impact it might be having on this field of tech policy and cybersecurity. I'm interested to know what impact do you think that the pandemic and the rapid transition to a virtual world has had and will continue to have on this field, and how can students kind of maybe get ahead of that or take into consideration anything that might have changed because of that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think we're coming up to, certainly in the UK, we're coming up to a year of working outside of the office now, and I think initially most people thought we were going to be out of the office for a month, maybe 2 months, and we're coming up to 12 now. And what it's meant is that businesses in the UK have really had to learn how to operate outside of the home environment, outside of the office environment, and people have had to learn how to work remotely as well. I think what we learned a few things in this time. So I think a lot of organisations realised just how much benefit there was to flexible working and working away from the office. I think people working at home realised how much they actually enjoyed being at home or didn't enjoy being at home, and it's been quite a pivotal time for people making decisions around how much of their life do they want to spend in the office and how much of their life do they want to be spending at home. And this has huge implications for technology policy as well, because how do we best utilize the technology and the connectivity we have to improve quality of life? I think companies don't necessarily want everyone crowding into offices every day now. It's quite expensive in some ways, and not necessarily more productive. I think definitely in certain sectors people are finding themselves with better qualities of life and more productivity, and companies are finding themselves with lower costs just from working remotely. At the same time, the threats that the attack surface area for cyber criminals has increased massively. Suddenly, there are a lot more vulnerabilities in people's working patterns. You are online all the time. Your operations depend on connectivity, and so there's a lot more that cyber criminals can do to disrupt organizations' operations. So and sometimes that's very basic, and that's interrupting a phone call, which might not have a big impact, but can extend to shutting down of entire parts of an operation, or forging signatures because they have more access to your emails and your messages. So being able to know when to strike, being able to know how to target some of your organizational vulnerabilities better. So I think it's been a real mixed year of people learning about how to work differently, companies being able to accept how people work differently, but also us recognizing that doing this opens up other questions about how we manage that and how we keep that secure.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've seen a lot of challenges from this pandemic situation, but also a few opportunities arise, right? And it's about kind of pivoting and seeing which ones in the future are sustainable and work, which is going to be very fascinating to see unfold. So, as we approach the end of our time together, Irfan, we've talked about so much. We've talked about your journey, throughout the sectors, from the private sector to the nonprofit sector to now working with the government. We've talked about what it means and why it's important in terms of cybersecurity and tech policy. We gave students really actionable next steps on how they can begin to build their toolkit and position themselves well for the future of work in these fields. And we talked about how the pandemic has impacted it and how we can try and get ahead of that as students. So now, coming up to the end, I wanted to just ask you if you could leave viewers, students with one final thought or one piece of advice, encapsulating all that we've talked about to the best of your ability. What would that be?
It's a really big question. I think I would. That's a really tough question. I think what I'd say is, develop something that you can do that other people can't do as well as you, and usually that depends on finding out what it is that you really enjoy doing, what really gets you going, what you have a passion for. I think if you're thinking about your career and what you're going to do next, or what you want to do after university, you remember that you're going to be spending 8 to 10 or more hours a day in the office. So to get out of bed in the morning, you have to be really motivated, and to do well every day, you have to be really motivated. So really find what drives you, and for different people that means different things. It might be the content of the work that you're doing. It might be the location of the work that you're doing. It might be that is defined to certain set hours and predictability, so you can do things outside of work. It might be being around people. It might be being around the same people. It might be being around different people. It might be traveling to different countries. So really find what it is that motivates you to get out of bed every morning, spend 8 to 15 hours a day, however much time you're going to spend at the office, and don't be afraid to change when that changes. I think the world of work is such now that you don't necessarily have to stick to one thing. There are obviously exceptions, but I think that we have a lot more flexibility. We probably have the most flexible working environments ever seen. So don't be afraid to kind of follow what it is that you enjoy. That being said, that should give you an idea of what you can do or what you want to do, and then build up that that toolkit of yours that allows you to do the things you want to do. For me, it was working with people and being able to manage teams, large teams, parts of an organization, and that's allowed me to do things that I really enjoy doing, and I think that's the same for everyone.
All right, so that marks the end of our time together. But thank you so much to you, Irfan, for joining us and sharing your insights and wisdom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you also to our viewers for tuning in today. Make sure to stay tuned to The Ismaili for other Careers of the Future episodes, to hear Ismaili professionals who are leading in their field and talking about what the future of work looks like for their sector. In the meantime, stay well, stay safe, and Yali Madad.